Hello. The 2021 census is due to take place on the 21st of March this year. And already I've been hearing words from the various secularist and humanist associations saying, if you're not religious, for goodness sake, say so. There's a great deal of honesty about that. If you don't have religious feelings, if you don't believe in God, if you don't consider yourself in any way remotely religious, why should you say otherwise? So it makes great sense. It's an exercise in honesty to do that. Of course, I've not actually looked at the census yet, and the question is, well, what am I going to put? And the answer is very easy. I'm going to declare myself to be a member of the Anglican Catholic Church, and that's important because at least it will register us as a religious existence. It might not give us an official option, but there'll probably be more people who say that they are Jedi than they are Anglican Catholic, and that's fine. Being an Anglican Catholic, like being a Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox, is a calling, really. One has to listen to God. One has to listen to God very, very carefully and do what He says. It may well be that God is calling you to be Anglican Catholic. He might be calling you to be Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox. If that's the case, well, you go where you're put. That's the important thing. But it's also important to make a declaration, to nail your flag to the mast and say, this is what I am. And not to be ashamed of that. If one is honestly seeking and learning and studying and praying and above all seeking obedience with God, that's surely a good thing. That's what the church is there to do, to help people to find that resonance, to find that grace in so much supply. But it'll come with a cost. To declare oneself a Christian, as in the past, like Saints Perpetua and Felicity, whose feast day is liturgically today, because I'm talking in the evening, but March the 6th. It costs you your life. These days, in certain places, particularly in Africa, the business of being a Christian is still deadly, when people who are completely against Christianity will take your life. And we've seen, even in the West, for example, the example of Father Jacques Hamel, who was killed by extremists, religious extremists. Whether he's a martyr or not, recognised by Rome, is, well, that's not our consideration. We can be convinced that he is with God. But what about here in the West? We're all so lovely and comfortable. Well, there is this little thing now called cancel culture, where certain things are being stopped because they might offend. Well, the reason that our Lord was crucified was because he offended by telling the truth. In St. John's Gospel, we read of him completely scandalizing the Pharisees, even scandalizing his own disciples to the extent of the whole discourse in chapter 6 on the bread of life. He told the truth, and it offended. St. Stephen too told the truth, and the Pharisees stopped their ears, and they stoned him because they didn't want to hear the truth. Recently I had dealings with someone who was accusing one of the members of our Anglican Catholic Church of being of saying hard things. And I replied, well, it's freedom of speech. One should be allowed to express one's opinion. And the reply came back, well, that doesn't excuse you from freedom of consequences. If you speak, then you have to take the consequences of it. That's true. Every action has a consequence. Aristotle's philosophy is based on that. The consequences that this person was talking about was, well, a social morality. Who gets to decide whether the consequences of someone's free speech are just, are fair, are moral? And it's interesting how we're interpreting what is right and moral with our own society's truth values. Now, it's perfectly true, racism is an evil. Sexism, the idea that women are inferior to men, is immoral. It's not what Jesus taught, certainly. And certainly the Church adopted priests, bishops, laity of all races. The Romans were allowed in, the Gentiles were allowed in. It's an embracing, encompassing religion. But freedom of speech is something that we say we cherish, and the moment where that is challenged, we're faced with something that challenges our values. Do we cover our ears and say, I'm not going to listen to that, it's not right, it's not fair, it's completely immoral? Whose morality? Jesus talked about love. It means I can love whoever I want. Well, not quite. The love that he's talking about is a very, very particular kind of love. And one can read about that very clearly in 1 Corinthians 13. And particularly all those list of values of what love is. So we have to be careful with what we say these days, apparently, or we will get cancelled. That's a sort of social death, isn't it? Sort of having a testimony, but it being silenced by those who don't want it to be broadcast. It does mean that we will need to risk being offensive occasionally, in the sense that we wish to promote true love, that everyone is valuable, that everyone is a child of God, and that God himself, in the person of our Lord Jesus Christ, was crucified in order to save people from their sins. Not that sin is a complete rejection of God, though that is the sin, but they are forgivable. The moment we turn to God and receive His love, not on our terms, but upon His, because God is love. When we do that, we stop thinking of ourselves as having conditions on who can love us. We need to think about our moral systems. What's truly right? What's truly moral? And we need to stick with that. A morality that evolves, that shifts and changes with the wind is not going to be God's, because God is eternal. God is always the same. And that may be offensive to some people, that God is always the same. But God always identifies himself as a He, our Father. Jesus is a male. That offends some people. And sometimes I wonder why. However, the church's message is that of love. To help people get better from evil, which isn't necessarily something they cause. Some people, in sin we are conceived. It doesn't mean to say we necessarily are born sinful, but we are born in sin. We feel the effects of the sin around us from the very beginning, like being buffeted by the waves. And sometimes we cause waves. And we see children being affected by evil that hasn't got a definable source, at least not that we can perceive. So we do need to keep our heads, we need to be rational, we need to be loving, we need to be true. And we need to recognise every single human being as an icon of God. However marred that image may be, it can never ever be taken away. Every human being has a dignity that is beyond their understanding, because it is the same dignity, same worth that our Lord Jesus Christ paid the price for on the cross. And so this Lent, to reflect on what really offends us and why we find it offensive. We need to be ready to put our head above the parapet and be ready to be shot at. May God bless you as you come to standing up and being counted, particularly in the census. May God bless you in your witness of the truth. And may you always be able to pass on God's love, in your life, in your work. God bless you, and please pray for me.